about nothing to do with coaching and mentoring. So if you're in the wrong space, then it's time to go. I'm Fiona from Fiona MacNeill Associates, and up until last Monday there was no chance of me actually being here. I had no idea I was going to be here. So I'm here through one of these really interesting sliding doors moments, where the person that you had from the Scottish Ambulance Service that was due to deliver this presentation on coaching and mentoring dropped out, and Fiona, who is in part of running the network, contacted Andy Swanson, who works beside her in North Ayrshire, and said, "Could Andy do it?" And he said no, but he knew somebody who could. So up until last Monday I wasn't going to be here, so I'm delighted to be here. And then I had a conversation with Fiona about exactly what it was that she expected me to do in 20 minutes. So interestingly, it's billed as a workshop. It's not really going to be a workshop because clearly with 30 odd of you, you can't really have a workshop in 20 minutes. So it's a bit of a storytelling and maybe just a bit of a rock in the pool to say, are we a bit hung up on coaching and mentoring and what the labels are? And Fiona said to me, it'd be really good if you could just talk about coaching and mentoring, the similarities, the differences. What's the difference between a coach and a mentor? And I said, well, I really don't want to do that because I think people can go and find that out for themselves. So in the kind of hope that a story might be a way of getting some alternative learning across about you getting the learning that you need, which is really what coaching and mentoring is about, then that's what I've gone for. So it's random, but I hope it's going to be okay. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. There's a folder for everybody if you'd like to take it away when you leave. There's a bit about our philosophy around what we would call thinking space. There's some stuff about our organisation, and also a couple of articles that I just thought as leaders out there you might be interested in, that you may or may not have previously come across. I've got no idea, but they're kind of things that I think are quite helpful, so that's all there for you. Please take one, everybody, before you leave. Okay, so I guess my whole kind of thing about this is, let's get past the label. What's it really about? And for me, what it's really about is learning from people who are different from you. Learning from people who have got different thinking from you. And I love the idea about divergent thinking in the boardroom. And I've often thought about it, I'm probably at that kind of age profile where you're thinking, maybe I could be a non-exec, maybe I could do that. And then thought, well, what have I got to bring to that party? What is, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an HR specialist, I'm a development consultant, I've worked in leadership for 29 years, I've been running my own business for 29 years, worked in partnership with a group of people for 20 years. So, what have I kind of got to bring to the table? And the chat before lunch about that diversity of thinking, for me, sits very much with my belief around what coaching and mentoring is all about. And because I haven't had round about me a structure of organisational development, where I sat down with a line manager and I had my PDP or my PDR or whatever it was, and somebody said, well, at your level we'll give you a coach, or at your level you need a mentor, or here's one of these, or this is where you go next. It's been very much an emergent process for me, where I kind of stumbled across what I needed as I needed it, and as I've got older I've got much better about going out after the thinking, the learning, the skill set that I wanted. So I've only had really 2 proper jobs before I've spent the rest of my career playing with ideas. I worked for Inverclyde District Council when I came out of art school, and after that I worked as an addiction counsellor in Ayrshire on the streets with unemployed people. Apart from that, I've just been having fun with people in rooms, groups, listening to people think, having a blast. Standing here thinking I know what I'm talking about when I probably don't. This is a quote from a woman that I've got a massive amount of respect for. Her name's Nancy Klein, and some of you may have come across her work. She's written a book called More Time to Think. And this is Nancy's thought about thinking. I don't know whether everybody's got access to the screen or whether it'd be helpful for me just to read it out. My thinking is not your thinking. I can think for myself and so can you. I add quality to your thinking and you to mine. We may agree, we may not, but even if we do inside that agreement, we still have our own thinking. And Nancy's thing off the back of that is really about thinking equals. And that idea that we see people who are, have come from a different ethnic background than us, a different social background than us, a different educational background from us, a different age group. I'm just looking at a young person sitting there. Not that I'm an old person, but people that are different, and say, you are my thinking equal. And that your thinking can enhance my thinking, and my thinking can also enhance your thinking. So in terms of where am I coming from with the rest of what I've got to say, kind of this is the place this is the seedling of it, if you like. So this is my story. That's me over on the left-hand side as a teenager at Greenock Academy, thinking probably that I knew everything and I didn't need anybody to help me to understand anything. Moving to the right as a belligerent art student with quite a lot of attitude, some of which, to be fair, I've managed to hold on to, although I've spent a lot of time working in public sector organisations. And I was having a really interesting conversation with a woman over lunch. I think she's not here at the moment. And she was saying, how do you get on when you go to broker work in organisations? And I said, well, very often I'm dealing with left-brain analytical finance people. There may be some of you in the room, please don't take any offence. And I've had to kind of readjust myself to that because I'm a right-brain creative. And how do you manage to have those conversations with people that think very differently from you? So at art school, really getting feedback but thinking I don't need it. Not understanding at all that feedback was something that could help me to grow, because what it felt like was criticism. And I'm almost sure in most occasions it wasn't offered as that. But there's something for me about how do we educate people to understand that feedback is stuff that helps us to grow. And I was just very briefly saying to Wilma, who happens to be my wee sister's boss's boss's boss. My wee sister's a head teacher in Inverclyde in a really great wee school in an area of what we would have called priority treatment 25 years ago. And I'm about to go in there and do some work with the children around a growth mindset, and we previously ran some leadership training for the children there. And it is that thing I think we really need to be doing at primary school, is bedding in that you will learn from mistakes and it's okay to fall down and make mistakes, and that it will be difficult when we don't get it right the first time, but also that feedback is a thing that is nourishing, is part of what helps us to grow. And it can take a while to get to that place, from my personal experience. Third photograph along, finally got a job. That's me there, by the way. There's an interesting bad set of haircuts here. With a group of young unemployed people in the east end of Greenock, where we were working on some community mural work. And I was kind of there as the expert. So you've got your degree from art school, you've got your train-the-trainer qualification in your hip pocket, you're sorted, you're ready to go, you're wheeled out. These are kind of young unemployed people from bad places. Sort it out, get something and do something good for the community. That's your mandate. On you go and get on with it. There was no support, there was no mentoring, there was no coaching. And actually the only support and learning I got from these young people. And I think at that point, probably at 24, 25, I think the penny started to drop. That I would get the learning that I needed in unexpected places that wouldn't necessarily be about formalised learning environments. Because I'd done the thing, I went to the good school, I came out the good school, I went on to further education, it's what everybody that I knew did. I got my degree, I did my postgraduate, I got the tickets, I came out, kind of thought the world owed me a living. Turned out actually it wasn't like that, surprise, surprise. So started to really learn that everybody had something that could help me to be a better version of myself. And whether we call that coaching, whether we call that mentoring, or whether we just call that actually walking around the planet, trying to see the unseen, trying to engage with what's emerging, I don't think, for me personally, does it really matter. I was then really fortunate to get some, through a big story, which I won't go into, some emerging opportunities, and met some people who believed in me and what I could do before I believed in it myself. So, Cameron Robertson here next to me with the bad suit on, and my founding director in business and my husband, David Gillespie, who believed that I could run a business and bring business through the door when all I thought that I could do was stand on my feet and deliver learning to people. So there is that thing about coaches, mentors, thinking partners, whatever we want to call them. For me, it feels really, really fundamental that whomever it is you sit in that space with is somebody that actually believes in you. So for me, it's not a hierarchical, cold kind of transactional type of situation. It's very much, it's an open-hearted connection with another person. So it's not just about head stuff, because with what's available to us now in the World Wide Web, we can go and get knowledge. We might need to then chat to somebody that's applied it before we have to get a sense of how we might apply it. But it's how do we get to that place where we can have those really open-hearted conversations about the stuff that keeps us awake at night. And if the feedback that I get from the people that think with me, whose thinking partner I am, is that creating that safe space for that to happen, a big part of that for them is that they understand that I believe in them and what it is that they're trying to do. So I think it's pretty fundamental, and we could go back to good old Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs and that whole thing about belonging and self-esteem and how important that is. And with that, I suppose, in terms of the thinking partner relationship, is something around being safe enough in that space with that person to be really vulnerable. And I'm not really sure that you can do that with somebody that works in the same gaff that you do. I don't know. I get a lot of feedback from people in public sector organisations that it doesn't necessarily feel that safe to do that, for all kinds of reasons. And that might not be your experience, and if it's not, that's fantastic. But I think it's something about how do you get, and that might be that you go somewhere else. So that might be that those of you that work in Police Scotland go and find yourself, you've connected with somebody here and you want to go and have a blether with them and they work in the NHS. And that might be a way of doing it. I think in amongst all of it, it is really important as you're in this learning process, which for me is a lifelong thing. It's not about something that you do and then it's finished. Is that you celebrate the success along the way and that you're celebrating that with the people that you're learning from. So whether that's about, one of the things that I did with this group of young people was we ended up going to London to see a Diego Rivera exhibition. Now some of you in the room may not know who Diego Rivera was. He was a political Mexican muralist, very rarely showed his work outside of Mexico. And what happened with these young people back in the day was you went and you did outdoor training, you built bridges and put tents up and all that kind of stuff. And we said we wanted to do something else, and they said, no, you're not doing it. And we said, right, okay. And we raised the funds and we washed cars, and Eddie's mum collected coupons from the Lever Brothers, and we all went on the bus to London for £6 return. And so we celebrated our achievement in terms of the work that we'd done in Inverclyde, in terms of the mural work that we'd done, by doing something together. And that I couldn't have done by myself, and they certainly couldn't have done by themselves. I didn't get hauled into the assistant director's office in the municipal buildings. I can remember it really clearly. Yeah. Hey ho! Would I go back and do it differently? No, I wouldn't. So there's something about celebrating success. This is me on the 10th birthday of Fiona MacNeill Associates. This is me in October last year, coming back from doing a prototyping boot camp at MIT. And this is some flower, a little corsage that was given to me and the rest of the team from my two sisters, who I also learned a lot from, to carry all the way to America to a conference where we were pitching up with a paper that we published about a leadership programme that we delivered in the NHS in England. So really, really important to do that celebration thing, however you go about doing that. And I think, remembering for me, that the part of the stuff about having a thinking partner, expanding your thinking, expanding your doing, having your thinking challenged, is that I am part of a team, and this is my team, and that my expectation is that the learning is not just for me as the founding director of the business, but for the whole team. So what is it that's happening for them and all the stuff that they're doing, that they bring to the party, and how do we kind of learn from each other? Historically, coaching and mentoring has just been a kind of one-to-one thing, you know, with those kind of, what I would call old-fashioned labels on them. So that's a bit about my story. So what does it mean for me now? Well, I guess it's about learning from thinking equals, and these are thought leaders in my world. So this is Nancy Klein, this is a woman called Anne Radford, who trained with David Cooperrider. I don't know if anybody in the room is familiar with a methodology called appreciative inquiry. Some of you, which is a positive psychology framework to focus on what's working instead of what's not working. A reserved problem-solving methodology. And this is a guy called Otto Scharmer, who's an academic from MIT and has recently put together an online learning experience called ULab, which many of you may have heard of. I was lucky enough to I was part of the ULab prototype in January last year, and that's what ended up getting me to MIT to the prototyping bootcamp. This is my, interestingly called, coaching circle that I met in January 2015 through the work that I did on ULab. And these people are all based in various parts of the US, and we convene every 8 weeks on Google Hangout, which is a bit like group Skype for those of you that are not familiar with it. And we use a methodology called. So we each have an opportunity to bring a case to the table, and then there's a methodology that the rest follow to provide feedback on that thinking, to try and enrich that thinking, get underneath that thinking. But it's not about, oh, when I was one of those, I did this. So it's not that. It's just not that. It's about coming at it from a completely different perspective. So for each of us wanted to get when you signed up for ULab, which was this massive online learning experience, there was various things you could do. So you could basically kind of be a spectator to all the content, and the content is amazing. And just as a bit of a plug, it's going live again very soon. And even if all you do is sign up to look at the content, some of the stuff that is on there and the thought leaders that they've managed to bring together to offer out is absolutely astonishing. If you do nothing else with it, it's definitely worth just having a look at that. So we wanted to get the ticket. You could get a ticket if you did so much extra stuff. So every week for 8 weeks we spoke, which is pretty tricky across 4 different time zones, but we managed it. And then we committed to keep going until the end of last year. And then we committed to keep going until the end of this year. And in 5 weeks' time, we're convening in New York for a thinking space, and it will be the first time ever that we will have met each other face to face, which I'm really, really excited about. Now, if you'd told me 10 years ago that I would get into something that didn't mean I could get my arms around somebody in a room, I would have said, don't be ridiculous, you can't do that. You can't learn that kind of way. But of course, I've understood that you can, and that's all in your head. I still think around leadership development, around growth, it's nice to be together in a space, but it's a both and rather than an either or. These are people that are very different. Dawn's 71, Julie's 26, I'm 56, Ellen and Bernard are probably about the same. They come from all different kinds of backgrounds. So Bernard's lived in community for 25 years, Julie's a school teacher in a tough area of Philadelphia, Ellen's a marketing director, and Bernard is a responsible financier. They're very, very different from me, and they've got very different thinking. But the process of convening together and coming together to hear that different thinking, even although you might find yourself in that space kind of going, really? I'm not sure. Because there's a format where you're committed to not actually interrupting and not saying, no, I'm really not sure about that. then actually very often what happens is that slots into place later. So there's something about some structure, there's something about putting a membrane around it, there's something about seeking out people that are very different from you. And Julie is my thinking partner in the top left-hand corner, and I met Julie when I did my training with Nancy Klein about 4 years ago, and Julie and I have been thinking together initially for a year, probably on a fairly structured basis, and now on a kind of need-to type basis. So she's my go-to person if I'm feeling as if I'm losing my resilience. Because her thing is, she's a resilience coach. And it was interesting when we went and did our training with Nancy, there was myself and 3 other women, of whom Julie was one, and they all labelled themselves as coaches. And I was saying, well, I'm not really a coach. And I've recently had it confirmed to me that I'm not a coach, and you probably know about this, Hazel, but I'm not holding you accountable. Where I get completely bombed out of a tender for some work with the Scottish Government or with the NHS Education Scotland because I didn't have a coaching qualification. And I didn't have a supervisor to supervise my coaching qualification. And there's a bit of an industry kind of growing out of all of that, I think, for me. That doesn't mean that you're actually getting the best person. So there's something about how do you get a grip of this? How do you go out there and actually be really proactive and say, do you know what? I met you today and I'm just absolutely sure that there's something that we could have a conversation that would just be great, and just do that. And not rely on the machine of big organisation land to kind of fix it and sort it for you. And I'm not saying that you are, but I'm just saying that you can get out, there's some really interesting people out there and you can get to them. Look at where I've ended up today by accident. And this is a group of delegates on a recent leadership development programme that we ran in an NHS organisation in Lancashire. And this is my brother-in-law Robin, who's a musician. And this group of nurses created their vision by writing a song. And I learned so much about the deeper purpose that nurses hold in terms of the work that they do as a result of them producing this really creative piece of work. And then actually followed up with 3 or 4 of them afterwards and said, I'd really like to talk to you more about that. Help me to understand what it is that's happened in the 20-year career that you've had, where you had this deeper purpose that was so emotional that you could bring it out in a song and have 40 other people in the room greeting, to actually you got swallowed up by big organisation land and lost your place and couldn't feel as if you could bring your deeper purpose to the table, or your deeper purpose was being challenged all the time. So it's being hungry, it's getting learning where you can, and it's, for me, it's not something that happens on a day at a time, it's all of the time. It's being open and ready to naturally occurring opportunities, and actually getting in amongst these thought leaders. And you know, I've got a bit of the thing in my head, you know, when I got accepted to go in this programme to MIT, where there was 500 applicants in 40 places from around the world. And there was only me there from Scotland and one other guy from the UK. And as I was flying out there, I was having the, how did the wee lassie from Greenock end up going to MIT? I did have that, so I've still got that voice in my head sometimes. But I just decided to get in amongst it with Otto and challenge him about some of the stuff that I thought was actually not that helpful, and really try and hold him to account as his customer, you know, as the receiver of his thinking, just to ask him questions. So it's trying to not make rules up about what's possible and what's not possible. I'm puffed out now. And finally, so what does this mean now for Fiona MacNeill Associates? Well, one of the things that we piloted last year was an open thinking space experience where we took a group, and it happened to be 8 women, we took a group of 8 women away to the island of Fiona off the west coast of Scotland. And we ran a 4-day thinking space where we did work with them around their deeper purpose, we did work around with them where they saw their future purpose. And most of these women would have been probably early 40s to mid 50s. Not that that means that you can't do it for anybody younger than that, but it just so happened. I think there is a kind of question mark that appears that, okay, so, and a lot of these women have had their families and they're up, and it's kind of, so what's my purpose now and what am I doing next? And not all of these women worked in big organisations. One of them had followed her husband, who is a big cheese researcher, all the way around the world as he was trying to catch his Nobel Prize, and kind of gave up what it was that she was going to do that. So getting people together in a space, and the island of Fiona is my maternal homeland. My grandfather was born and brought up there, my sister works there, she's got a gallery, she's a silversmith, and as part of what we did in that thinking space, people created an artefact of their thinking from etched silver, which they then took home with them. So the thinking that was about me getting better as a thinker is now having an impact on an offer that we can make out to customers, which obviously if you're in business is a really important thing to be able to do. And also thinking partner sessions. So probably at the moment I'm the thinking partner to about 15 people. The youngest person is in second year at university and she doesn't pay for it. And the oldest person is a chief executive in a public sector organisation, and he does pay for it. So it's kind of that whole thing about you're trying, and it's really important to me to support the next generation that are coming up and to try and put something back. And this is just something that somebody said. Director from NHS, Fiona, who I'm his thinking partner, who said, the difference from my experience is twofold. The style of my thinking partner and the process. The process has been new to me and one where I felt unrestrained and free in my thinking. So the only agenda that the thinking partner has, and that would be the word exchange for coach mentor if you want to, slide those along, is to help the person to think better for themselves. So it's not about the thinking partner's thinking, it's about the thinker's thinking. And of course, if you're allowed to think freely, it's quite interesting to see where your thinking takes you. So, I suppose going back to the question, coaching, mentoring, does the label really matter? I guess what I would want to leave you with is it's the intent that you have and the desire that you have for your future that is actually way more important than whether you need a coach or whether you need a mentor. Because actually what you will need is a whole bunch of different folks to help you with a whole bunch of different things that you want to think better on or you want to have your thinking challenged about.